Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Weekly Hope. I'm Kirsten Hagland. It's great to be with you. And of course, as you know, if you've tuned in before, I always bring Elsa on at the top of the show to say hello to everyone and welcome you. Elsa is my nugget toy poodle who lives with me here in Zurich, Switzerland. She's my light and joy, and she's always here to try to bring a little bit of light and joy into everyone else's life as well. So, really excited to have you with us because we're diving into a topic today that is surrounding a term that has been in use more commonly in the last couple of years, and it's the term orthorexia, and it's used to describe a kind of an eating disorder which is not actually in the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostics and Statistical Manual, the 5th edition, DSM-5, but is getting a lot of attention. And so we wanted to bring on a dietitian, an expert, to talk about what orthorexia is, what it is not, to dispel some myths and some rumors, and to also, of course, give people some hope and some tools if they might be struggling with this or they know someone who might. So in order to break down all of that, I would like to welcome our guest for this week, and that is Jessica Setnick. She's a registered dietitian, and she's joining us from Dallas. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. So Jessica has done not only work on her own with clients, but also trains clinicians. She has an eating disorders boot camp that she does for clinicians. So she really has paved the way in a lot of regard, and so far as eating disorders and the nutrition and the dietitian aspect of it. So Jessica, you've talked a lot about orthorexia and you've written about it. So why don't we just dive right in? If people have not heard of this term before, what exactly is orthorexia?
So orthorexia, as you mentioned, isn't an official eating disorder, but the terminology is used to describe someone who has dysfunctional eating behaviors with the goal of being healthy or pure or clean to the point where they're no longer eating healthy because it's gone so much to an extreme.
Gotcha. And has this term been around for a long time? Is this something new?
Yeah, it was coined in 1997 by Stephen Bratman in an article, and then he wrote a book about it. But it really kind of became a media buzzword in the past few years when Jordan Younger, who I don't know, but she was known as the blonde vegan, and she had quite a large internet following. She recognized that her way of eating was really not healthy, even though her goal was to be healthy. And so she identified herself as having orthorexia. And when she did that, there was a lot of actual hate mail that she got from some of her followers that felt like she was judging them, even though she was just trying to express herself. And so the fact that it became sort of a messy situation, I guess, got some media attention. And so that media attention brought the word orthorexia sort of into the public consciousness in a bigger way than it had been before.
Really interesting. So what's the difference between orthorexia and anorexia? Because I think probably people get them confused, but there are some pretty distinct differences.
So actually, it's a question that is really up for debate right now. I participated in the International Orthorexia Nervosa Task Force in Italy earlier this year because there is a movement to try to get orthorexia recognized as its own unique eating disorder so that what stems from that is to do better research on it and then to get better treatment for it. But it kind of has to have a name before all that can happen. So the conversation centers around, is orthorexia its own specific eating disorder? Is it just a branch of anorexia or just a branch of obsessive compulsive disorder? And the main difference that has been identified is that in order to meet criteria for anorexia, someone has to endorse a drive either for weight loss or fear of weight gain. And with orthorexia, an individual might not say anything about wanting to lose weight, but more about modifying their eating in order to feel healthy, to feel clean, or to feel pure.
Right. And so, I was doing a bit of research and reading online about people who had struggled with this before. And one point that someone made, and I thought it was really interesting, was that they said, I told myself, this is a quote, I told myself I didn't have an eating disorder because I didn't, quote unquote, fit into one of the categories. but you don't have to check off all the boxes to be struggling. I know that for a lot of people, I will include myself in that because I struggled with an eating disorder and I know what this mindset is like, that you can look at the list of criteria for whether it be anorexia or bulimia or binge eating disorder or orthorexia and say, oh, well, I don't meet all of those criteria, so that must not apply to me.
Yeah.
But what are some of the boxes, so to speak, that pertain to orthorexia insofar as some of that criteria? But then also, can you dispel the myth that like you have to meet every single one of those in order to be worth treatment?
So you are totally speaking my language because I'm right there with you. I still, I just recently wrote about this on recovery box dash eating disorder or ed.com, that my eating disorder in my mind never seemed serious enough or big enough or something like that. And I realized, as as a person in recovery, I guess for 20 years now, I realized that part of that minimization is part of the mental illness. And another part of it is feeling like, well, if I recognize how severe it was, then basically what that means is I deserve to get help and I didn't. And that's really sad. So there's lots of reasons why we might kind of, minimize and say, well, my friend does this more severe, and so therefore I don't have a problem. There's a lot to that. So, I just want to reinforce, I think that's very, very common. And so my sort of mission in life is no longer focusing on any diagnostic criteria at all, but really educating people that we all have eating behaviors, right? I mean, everyone who eats has eating behavior, and most of us have some kind of dysfunctional eating behavior that may or may not meet any diagnostic criteria. The question is really, are your eating behaviors positively or negatively impacting your life? By the time someone's eating behaviors are threatening their life, we would then call that an eating disorder, but that really doesn't cover most of the people who have dysfunctional eating behaviors, right? Dysfunctional eating behaviors may not be threatening your life, but they're still very significant parts of your life, taking up a lot of your time and attention. And so that's where I feel like those boxes that you're talking about, checking those boxes, really becomes much less important. And what's much more significant is, how are your eating behaviors affecting your functioning, affecting your daily life? And so in the case of orthorexia, or what we might just say call orthorexic tendencies, since we're not trying to diagnose someone by checking those boxes, orthorexic tendencies would mean something like paying more attention to the quality, the purity, the healthiness of your food, and getting detached from your internal hunger cues, the things that you like, the things that you can afford. I don't mean to make light of it, but if someone is, for example, like not buying their baby diapers because they have to buy specific kinds of food at a specialty store, right, that would suggest that their priorities are out of sync. And that sometimes happens with orthorexic tendencies, is someone feels like they have to have these special specific foods, even if they're not really in an appropriate price range, or they're not actually getting any benefit out of those foods, or sometimes it's supplements. So the impairment of functioning, where you are spending too much time or attention or money on a specific type of food that feels healthy. Another example of orthorexic tendencies would be the amount of self-esteem that someone feels based on their eating. And we might not identify, I feel really good when I eat this way, but it's easier to identify, I feel really bad if I eat these things. And so for someone's sort of self-worth and value to really center on the quality of what they eat. And I think that's really common, unfortunately. And it's supported in our culture, right? That you're a good person if you eat good food. And really, what does that mean? Good food, bad food. I mean, don't eat food that's spoiled or moldy, right? That would be bad food. But we have all these foods in our society that we sort of label as bad foods. And orthorexic tendencies mean that if someone were to eat one of those foods, they feel like they have done something bad, or that they are bad. And so overvaluing the food choices that you make as a way of determining your own worth or self-esteem, that would be another example.
Yeah, I just want to peek into our comments section here real quick and just say hello. We've got Samantha Breyer joining us. She says hello. We also have Charisse. She says hello. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And of course, if you're just jumping on to the live, let us know your name and where you're watching from, and any questions, of course, that you have for Jessica at any time. I'm monitoring this comment section so that we can make sure to get those questions in. So Jessica, something I'm really dying to ask you, because I know, because I've heard it from people all the time about, well, are eating disorders really a problem? And this is when talking about eating disorders in general.
Who says that?
Oh yeah, because they say that, obesity is such a huge problem. We don't have a problem with eating disorders, because they obviously don't understand the nuance or the complexity of the issue. They don't truly understand eating disorders. Oh, Sarah Rutherford says hello. Anita, hi. Thanks guys for letting us know you're here. But so what do you say to people who are already critical of increased attention on eating disorders because they say, oh, we have enough of a health problem with the obesity crisis. Now, if we say, hey, we want to talk about orthorexia, which is the quality of the food or focusing on too much on health, I mean, are people just going to be like, you guys are crazy?
Okay, so I have two totally separate paths in my mind on this. One is, who are these people? And the second one
there are lawmakers, there are people who work in media, there are people who work at top global health organizations. Like, unfortunately, Jessica, it's the ignorance is so, and some of it's willful, some of it's not, but I hate to break it to us all, but there's a lot of those people out there.
No, I'm very aware of that. And I know I live in a bubble among people who are very much in the mindset of eating disorders are a huge global problem, right? But just to put numbers on it, okay? 30 million Americans with diabetes. We talk about diabetes all the time, the health costs of diabetes, blah, 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 diabetes. There's commercials on TV for medicines to help you with your diabetes. You can't escape it. Well, guess what? For every person with diabetes, there's also a person with an eating disorder. 30 million people in this country with diabetes, 30 million people in this country with an eating disorder, and probably some of those overlapping. So why are we hearing about diabetes all day long, every day, and not hearing about eating disorders all day long, every day? Well, it has a lot to do with what we know how to treat and how we can make money. And so there's lots of money to be made in diabetes medication. There's not a lot of money to be made in eating disorder medication because there aren't a lot of medications that help people with eating disorders because we don't even know what the disease is yet. So it can be such a big, overwhelming problem that we don't have enough research on eating disorders. It's not people with eating disorders' fault. It's not anyone's fault. It's just the fact that we are so ignorant as a culture on mental health, mental illness, what causes mental illness. We don't even know what causes eating disorders. I mean, I could go on and on and on about the reasons, but I'll just give you two more facts. One is that for every dollar spent on eating disorders research, $20,000 is spent on research on HIV and AIDS. And I do not by any means begrudge research on HIV and AIDS. I'm just saying for every $20,000 spent there, only $1 goes to eating disorders research. So the disparity is way off, even though there are more people in this country with eating disorders than there are with HIV and AIDS combined. Again, not trying to say that HIV and AIDS isn't important.
Of course.
Just that eating disorders also are important. And then the other statistic I'll mention, sorry, did I interrupt you?
Oh, no, you go for it, girl. You're on a roll.
Okay, I could get fired up about this. The other statistic I wanted to mention, I totally lost my train of thought. I don't know, but it was important, trust me. So,
it's okay.
But when I think of it, I'll tell you. So bottom line is, what I would say to those people is that just because you don't hear about people with eating disorders all the time, just because you don't feel like eating disorders is a problem, does not actually mean eating disorders aren't a problem. Oh, I remembered my other statistic. Up to 15% of people with anorexia actually got it because of an infectious disease. So the idea that anorexia is actually contagious is a totally bizarre thought that nobody even would think is true, and yet it's true. So that's the kind of thing that we've just done a terrible job in our society of educating people about eating disorders, both because we don't know that much about them and what causes them, and also because very wrongly we have sort of colluded in keeping eating issues a secret and thinking of them as a personal choice and a personal failing. And so there are a lot of reasons why people aren't aware, and I do hope that we can make that change. But when it comes to obesity and eating disorders, and you're saying one gets attention and the other doesn't, to me, it's all the same stuff. The same things that cause weight issues cause eating disorders, right? Every single thing is the same. And yet we look at one outcome and say, this is a huge problem. And we look at another outcome and say, well, we don't even look at it at all. And why is that? I think it just has to do with a lot of social and cultural and financial factors that have nothing to do with the actual human cost of suffering from eating disorders.
Yeah, so many great points there. I'm wondering what advice you would give to educators or others that are involved in teaching kids how to eat. Because at first we had the food pyramid, and then we had myplate.gov with the Let's Move and Michelle Obama. And, and a lot of this, I think, good intentions, right? Although I have seen some absolutely horrible nutrition presentations for kids where they put a massive hamburger on the PowerPoint slide and say, don't eat this. And all the kids go, ew. And you're just like, what are we putting in these children's brains?
There was actually a scholastic that came home that said it was something about these cupcakes are killing you. And that was directed toward children. So we actually have two dietitians in our field, Anna Letts and Catherine Zavodny, and their whole mission in life is to overhaul the way we teach nutrition to kids in this country. And they're going to accomplish that. And I'm really glad. But their main point is that kids are so literal and they have such different developmental needs and different nutrition needs even than adults, that we're teaching them information that really maybe is more appropriate for adults, and we're teaching them in a method that's more appropriate to adults. But children are so much more literal and direct. And so we're giving them information that they can't actually use. And so when a teacher says in a health class that, let's say, a third of Americans are obese, a kid looks down and says, is it me? Right? They have no context to really understand some of those things. And so a lot of times the messages that we send to kids, and even the movies that are shown in health class, we have a study that shows that many eating disorders are caused by scaring kids about food. And so I do speak to health educators, and my message is that anything that we can do to encourage kids to follow their own intuition when it comes to eating, to eat appropriately spaced apart meals, to try to have a good relationship with food is so much more key than any one food that child will or won't eat. And I also teach that food insecurity is a huge problem. When I was growing up, it was always, you have to eat that because children are starving in China. But you know what? Children are starving across the street. And so when we have kids that are growing up with an unhealthy sort of or an inappropriate or inadequate amount of food to eat, it makes sense that they're going to develop dysfunctional eating behaviors and eat more when food is around. So we have to really look at sort of the big picture of eating issues rather than just focusing on this very micro, tiny issue of, which food is better than another. Really, it's all about sort of a rainbow of nutrition, and instead of this like minute focus on, how many crackers is in a serving.
Yeah, a rainbow of nutrition. I love that. And I just want to acknowledge Sarah here. She says she's listening from Australia. That's great. Thanks for joining us. She says it seems like it's a secret here too. And yes, this is definitely something that's global. And then Sonia says hello. Hello. Sonia from Germany says hello. It's great to have you.
Wiedersehen.
No, that's goodbye. So we want to keep her on. We've got Nikki here listening from the UK. Thanks, Nikki, so much for joining us. And that leads to a really great question. This is obviously not just an American phenomenon, and there's something that I think that a lot of people would acknowledge. Okay, this is a good thing, and when I say this, I mean, when we talk about food is it ethically sourced, for example? How are the animals treated? How, are there sustainable methods used in growing the food, right? Is it good for not only the environment, but also the people groups who harvest this food, that plant this food and depend on it for their livelihood? There's a whole bunch of ethical questions surrounding food now, which on the one hand is, yes, it's great for us to be aware of that. On the other hand, how does that affect someone with orthorexic tendencies or with an eating disorder? And how do you balance that desire to eat well, but not to obsess? Because that is a very, very difficult position.
That is a great question, and I'll do my best to be concise because we could talk about just this for the next 2 days, right? But there's nothing about orthorexia that says you can't eat in a way that meshes with your integrity, right?
That's
So
so good.
there's a concern, and Stephen Bratman, who coined the term orthorexia, is it's very important to him that any definition of orthorexia doesn't legitimize or delegitimize any type of eating. And as a dietitian, I feel the same way. And the bottom line is, can someone stay nourished? So if you can stay nourished eating only food that's been locally sourced, right? Fished for in your area, grown in your area, transported from within, a certain number of miles, then that's wonderful. Please do that, right? And if you can't, then occasionally you may have to have a food that's been imported. But, I've got a vegetable garden right out here. And if I tried to only stay nourished from the food that's in my vegetable garden, I couldn't do it, right? I have to at least trade some of my food to the person with the chicken coop across the way and get some of their eggs, right? There's a point where in order to stay nourished, I may have to expand my window or my circumference or whatever you want to call it of what foods I'm willing to include and how I'm willing to obtain them. So that, to me, staying nourished is the bottom line. But if you could stay nourished, by not eating any animal products or by only eating products that meet your ethical standards, then fantastic. And I want you to do that. And I don't object to that. And I wouldn't call it orthorexic.
Yeah.
Orthorexia or orthorexic behaviors start when someone, let's say, for example, let's say I do eat in a vegan manner and I'm comfortable with that. And if you were to bring me a birthday cake and I ate it, and then afterwards I found out that there was an egg in it, can I be flexible enough with my self-esteem and my self-concept to say, well, you know what? I try to be vegan. I made a mistake. Kirsten didn't realize I ate 1/8 of an egg. I can live with that. I can move on. I don't choose to eat eggs, but that's the way it went down and we're going to get through it. Or do I feel like I have to repent from that? Do I feel like I have to not eat for 3 days? Do I feel like I have to throw it up? Right? Does it impact me to the point where I am no longer well functioning? And that's the issue. It's more of a bit of a flexibility issue, perhaps, on top of the can I stay nourished? And so that's where does it become a moral issue to me in the sense of I'm a bad person if I am imperfect? Does that answer your question?
Oh, that is such a good distinction. Nikki here says staying nourished and balanced eating with everything else in your life. That's a really, really great segue into the last kind of thing that I wanted to talk with you about regarding this subject. And yes, we could talk about this for hours because it's so relevant and timely right now because our culture is just so obsessed with health and weight loss. But as it transitions to something healthier, there's also a lot of risks as we're discussing. But Nikki says, nourished and balanced with everything else in your life. And you talked about self-concept. And I think it's important to address the underlying issues because we can talk about the food and the weight control behaviors or whatever other kind of behaviors all day long. But at the end of the day, we know that those are usually just leaves on the tree where the roots go deep. And so what are some of the, if someone's listening to this and they're thinking, gosh, that's really ringing true with me, or I see that in my friend or my loved one. Obviously, if you go to that person and you just say, you need to stop eating like that, or you need to fix this behavior, that's not going to work. What are some of the underlying issues that you think as a dietitian most at play when it comes to orthorexic behaviors?
Sure. So, I think it's not just my idea, but sort of an understood kind of thing that in some cases for some people, maybe most or a lot of people, that the way we eat, the way we look at eating is a metaphor for how we sort of approach life and approach our different sort of responsibilities and topics of life in general. And so being a perfectionist can be one of those things. And so someone who's really trying to be perfect in their eating, even though we know that's not possible to do because there is no perfect eating, that could signify that someone isn't feeling good enough in general in their life and is trying to sort of solve a problem with food that can't really be solved with food. And so, for example, if someone feels, let's just use the word bad, because I think that's a word, that sort of comes with a lot of meanings, but it could be guilty, it could be overwhelmed, it could be disappointed in themselves. So let's say someone feels bad after eating something. It's a lot easier to attribute that to the food and to say, well, I feel bad because I ate, and I'll just make up a food. I feel bad because I ate a piece of pizza, so I'm not going to eat pizza anymore. But if the bad feeling comes from something other than pizza, then it's not enough to not eat pizza, because the person's feeling bad the next day too. And so they haven't eaten pizza, so it must be something else. I feel bad because I ate French fries. So now they're going to cut out French fries, but they're still going to feel bad, because life involves sometimes feeling bad, disappointed, imperfect, inadequate, rejected, all kinds of things that sometimes equal bad. And if we look to a food to try to eliminate it, or we eliminate the food hoping it'll eliminate the feeling, then we're not ever going to feel good enough. And we're going to keep eliminating food after food after food. And so that's just one example. Perfectionism might be something someone's struggling with, or inadequacy. I do think a really important clue is how someone feels after they eat is probably how they were feeling before they eat. And I can explain more about that. But your question was really, what can you do to help someone, or if this is ringing true for you? And the key is really, oh no, your question was, what could some of the other underlying things be? Another thing might be loneliness. Sometimes following a special diet, because there's so much on the internet and there are support groups and Facebook groups for each of the different diets, can help someone feel connected to other people, even though you're still sitting at home in your pajamas, but it makes you feel like you're connected. Another thing is feeling powerless or feeling aimless, feeling like you're not goal-oriented or achieving your goals in life. And so, having these set goals for food can feel like, yes, I achieved my goal. So I maybe haven't achieved my goal in the workplace or with my bank balance or in my relationship, but I can get that feeling of satisfaction and accomplishment through my food. And so anything that someone is using their food for, honestly, that points to a void in their life in another area. So it can be very, very, very individual for different people, because some people are looking for connection through food, whereas some people are looking for independence through food. So you can't really assume anything based on someone's eating. It's really important that they kind of look within and are able to see what role they're trying to fill. So that leads me to the other thing, which is, what can you do for someone? And the most important thing is really to support someone and having someone that they can talk to about it. And so whether that is a dietitian or a counselor, in either case, I think it's really important that that person be an eating disorder specialist rather than just a general dietitian or counselor or even doctor, because unfortunately, because of what we're talking about, the idea that some of these sort of restrictive eating behaviors can be interpreted by our culture as, you have so much willpower, or you're so strict with yourself, I'm so impressed, I wish I could be like that, that unfortunately someone who's not experienced with eating disorders can actually do harm in one of these cases. So in order to find an appropriate eating disorder professional for dietitians, there's a website, eddietitians.com, with a treatment finder. There's also edreferral.com, where you can find a therapist, and healthprofs.com is another one where you can search for an eating disorder professional. So really the best thing we could do to help someone else is to say, I'm concerned about your eating, and I've done some research and I found this professional that I think maybe an expert in this area, and I'd like to go with you to see if we could get more information.
Jessica, that is a really, really wonderful way to wrap it up, and so much goodness. Just want to say too that Carla is saying, yes, this makes so much sense. I've never looked at my disorder this way. Samantha says, yes. Thank you guys. Nikki has a great comment. She says, love the simplicity of the idea that how you feel after food is how you felt, but maybe couldn't connect with before. And I agree.
Is Nikki a real person, or is Nikki just like a secret, like, branch of you and me who's just like telling us that, she totally gets it?
Nikki is in the UK agreeing and high-fiving with us.
You're so right on, Nikki. It's so, and I think that if that's the one thing that people can take away from this, is don't blame the food for how you feel. Use the food as a clue to help you identify the feelings that are intangible that you're walking around with all the time, and get some care for that feeling. I think that's the best thing to take away from this.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think also a great thing to just drive home at the end of the day is that we often cannot get over these things by ourselves. And so um, Jessica is an RD. She is an example of an awesome dietitian who is the kind of person that you want on the other side of a table with you, helping you to walk through and process through this stuff. So people like Jessica exist in the treatment world. So if this is ringing true with you, or you know a loved one who might be struggling, you know, make that call, reach out. Eatingdisorderhope.com also has a lot of really great resources. And there's a few articles that we've posted in the comments section to give a little more info about orthorexia, signs, symptoms, treatment for providers as well. So feel free to check those out. But most of all, we just wanted you to be empowered by some of this information, to take a good look at yourself and the people around you, and also be empowered to get help if you need it. So that is a wrap. Jessica, thank you so much for your insight and just handling this with a lot of candor and a really wonderful sense of humor as well.
Thanks. I just think that the more we can be real and the more we can be open about our own eating struggles, the more we just take that stigma and shame, you know, we take it away, and help other people to be their authentic selves too. And oh, you know what I'll just mention is I just want to mention that you have a link to this handout down at the wherever it is on Facebook, and if there's someone that you are worried about in your life, that you could always print that out and say, you know, I went to this webinar about this, and I just wanted to, you know, share this with you, because it does answer the question, how can healthy eating be bad, which is a really obvious question to ask. If I'm trying to eat healthy, how can that be a bad thing? And so hopefully it can help you as well. If you don't necessarily have the words to describe what you're going through, you could always bring this into your doctor or to your, you know, to a dietitian or to a family member and say, no, this is how I feel and I need some help.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you for mentioning. We will post that PDF so that people have it. And we will wrap this up. This was incredible. Thank you, Jessica.
Wiedersehen.
You rock. Wiedersehen. But before we go, just want to let you guys know, third episode of Weekly Hope down. Next week, Wednesday, we'll see you back here on Eating Disorder Hope's Facebook page for another episode of Weekly Hope. I'll announce the guest. Hold on. Let me just make sure that I'm all good. We're all good with our guest. Yep. So next week, we've got Jeannie Burnett on. She's going to talk about PTSD and eating disorder recovery, because June is PTSD Awareness Month. So we want to make sure that we dive into that as well. But so super excited. That'll be at 6 p.m. Eastern next week, Weekly Hope here on Facebook. So share this video with your friends. Of course, we want this to be a resource to as many people as possible. We just want to get the information out there. That's what we're all about. We care about you. So share, tweet, Facebook away, and even more than that, enjoy the rest of your day. All right, Jessica, thank you so much. We're signing off. Ciao from Zurich. Jessica, bye from Dallas, and we'll see you all next week on We Hope. Ciao.